COSA board chairman Richard Rogers, in announcing the promotion of Liam Brody to CEO, described him as the right leader to unlock the exponential impact of the organization. Brody, quote, "as an accomplished and visionary leader who can drive the transformative change needed to help tackle today's sustainability challenges," writes Rogers. Liam was president of Sustainable Harvest, a trailblazing B Corporation and leading specialty coffee importer. As president, he doubled the company's size, leading strategy and operations, while overseeing sourcing, sales, finance, marketing, technology, talent, and impact. Liam spent nearly a decade with impact investing pioneer Root Capital, helping unlock $1 billion in finance for small and growing agricultural businesses around the globe. Earlier, Liam was director of sustainable coffee for Green Mountain Coffee, now Keurig Dr. Pepper, and was a program manager, campaign director, and private sector advisor for the humanitarian organization Oxfam, where he played a crucial role in building the fair trade market. He earned a Bachelor's of Science in Agricultural Education from Cornell and holds a Master's of Education degree in Social Policy from Harvard. Congratulations on your appointment. It's an outstanding choice on COSA's part.
Dan, you're one of my heroes in the tea and coffee community. I've learned so much from reading and traveling with you over the years. Pleasure to be part of this conversation.
In just a sentence or two, will you tell listeners what you will do now that you've got the reins in hand?
Been working at the intersection of data and sustainability, really working to transform food and agricultural systems since the early 2000s. It started with the question of, well, what do we measure? How do you measure that? What do you do when you have the data and you've measured it? And then how do you make sense of it? And we're taking that forward. We're working with really exciting partners to try to bridge these gaps that a lot of us that come from tea and coffee and chocolate, we love the craft. We love, the value chain. We love the producers. We just love everything about this culture. But we might not be as familiar with, computer science. We might not be, as familiar with how to use data. We might not be as familiar with how all of these advances, could solve problems that many of us have been wrestling with for decades. And so for me, we're bringing those solutions from COSA to tea, to coffee, and to so many more industries, so we can be part of building a food and agriculture system in the world that works, that is climate proof, and that is economically friendly for all involved. And, that used to be pie in the sky. And now with data, new tools, generative AI, and so much more, it's a reality knocking on our front door. It used to be that no matter how smart the human was in this equation, we just couldn't process all this data ourselves. Just too many variables. Old school, forget the new variables coming at us. But now when we start to layer this data together, it's amazing predictability that's around the corner. But here's the thing that's missing for a lot of folks. Where's the system? And how are those systems talking? And how do they interrelate? So it's not the one hyper-capitalized set of gardens. It's not the one trader, but they become ubiquitous throughout the industry where growers are feeding data in. And this is allowing us to play a granular game, like you said, for consumers, for all of these, variables that we couldn't once, really cater to, but now we can in a sophisticated way. And that starts to address how do you deal with switching with, suitability for growing with climate, and how do you begin to adapt real time? Because these are not harvest over harvest moments. These are day after day moments that you see all of these changes that ultimately affect consumer availability. We spent last year, we're doing a massive project with the Gates Foundation right now that is just a joy to be a part of. We are figuring out what we're calling lean and agile data. What do we need to do to figure out the most innovative ways, light touch ways to be able to measure? And a lot of us are going back to what we all know. There are tools that a lot of us in especially Western consumer culture, I get a text from my doctor. Do you want to confirm that appointment? I get a phone call from a computer that says, your child didn't make it to school on time today. Why aren't we using those same technologies in ways in supply chains? And so what we're doing now is we're using tools like coded WhatsApp messages where we can meet growers where they are, harness the data live time, real time, in the moment, and move it into play quickly. So you don't have to wait till the end of the harvest. Just like you're saying, Bill and the team at UC Davis is doing, step by step by step. So we don't have to wait for the whole chain to digest that problem and then look backwards and say, what happened?
Alan Lay and his team at Profile Print in Singapore, and Dr. William Ristenpart, who heads the Coffee Lab at the University of California, Davis, have each developed cloud-based apps to identify raw and finished leaves, seeds, and grains. IDAAS as an authentication service that uses desktop sensors, scanners, and even cell phones to upload digital profiles and in seconds download detailed chemical and physical attributes of the sample that reveal and quantify defects, colors, shape, the presence of adulterants, and other characteristics closely correlated to organoleptic qualities assigned by trained tasters.
Absolutely. Our inability to analyze where something bad happened in the QA process. And we always assume it's earliest in the chain often. And we know that the cup was good. Then we have a better sense that, it must be somewhere after that. It's probably whoever bought that. But a lot of the time, the middle is blurry. A lot of us have had friends that have been invested in things like sensors and containers, but, insufficient sort of data flowing from that. I love the idea of, shortening those feedback loops so you can quickly identify handling issues. You can quickly give feedback. And frankly, you can quickly course correct, from a market perspective, if something goes sideways, and find alternatives.
Listen to this. You're a grocer with 100,000 pounds of this stuff inside your warehouse. You throw a sample in the analyzer, and now you know you've got 4 weeks to sell it before staling becomes such a critical issue that you'll have to discount.
So, and then you integrate that into other data models that start to look at supply chain risk, that look at political risk or climate risk, that start to correlate those. And then you get into the predictability, which is super cool.
Oversupply of tea is widespread. It's a cyclical problem that depresses prices over decades. Tea multinationals exerted control over supply because they own plantations and factories and employed large workforces. Today's markets are fragmented, and there will never be a one-size-fits-all tea. Sellers have unprecedented access to data, however, and those who monitor consumer preferences could order tea on demand. In specialty coffees, Starbucks and Nespresso set quality minimums, then either vet or train growers to meet those standards, rewarding them with long-term contracts at premium prices, and achieving balanced supply and demand for their markets.
That's the future. That's absolutely it, Dan. And here's what I love. I mean, not to bring it back, too much on the sustainability side, but it used to be what we would separate these out. We'd say sustainability, it becomes a hurdle for some growers because it was seen in a silo. It was seen as if it wasn't part of this system. And now what we have the ability to do, if we're collecting the right data at the right time, we can start to understand the correlations between sustainability investments and core business ROI. We can start to see how labor, how biodiversity, how water scarcity, how production fits in live time, real time with pricing, with market demand, with profile changes. If you can start to have access to that data and then make sure that it's not, what the computer scientists say is dark data. It's not just sitting there on a shelf, but moving quick to action and insight for everyone, especially the grower. Like you said at the beginning, we can all be part of starting to understand, what investments to make and when to get that tea on demand ultimately to the right market at the right price. And we're starting to see really powerful correlations, But in order to play in that, you have to figure out, one, what you're measuring. You have to have places to, to put that. And then you have to have systems that work to analyze and visualize and allow the value chain to participate. And right now, there's not enough of that. You can see, and just in your examples, the companies that are investing in data and have been for years are now figuring out how to harness it and are leaping far beyond those that don't have that. If you've just looked at data and measurement of these things from a compliance issue and not a core business performance issue, you've missed out. And the window's closing because we know that regulations are changing. We know that consumer demand is predicated upon evidence. And we also know that climate change is changing everything from, shifts in growing regions and suitability and yield and quality and pest outbreaks. Forget, what that will do to labor shortages and the human rights impacts that follow from those things. If we don't have data at the center, we don't get to manage through that, let alone play in certain markets as in coffee, cocoa, beef, palm, etc. And it's coming for tea. We all know that it's the next wave. And so to be able to get to a point where you can pull those tools together, you can start to have these insights for operators, not for PR, but for operations, core operations. How do I really mitigate risk? How do I build resilience? How do I meet the market, the way I need it as a trader, as a buyer, as a brand, and as a producer? I think you're right. I mean, COSA sits at that intersection now where maybe 20 years ago, we scratched our heads about why sustainability, or if we did, it was, it's because I care. But now we're starting to be able to trace that back to this is core business. This is about performance for farmers. This is about performance for value chains. And this is about measuring what matters most in order to do that. And we all started with this idea of, well, what do you measure? We started to really standardize that across industries. You saw that last week at the FAO, conversation, where we're standardizing and normalizing. We don't have to guess anymore what these things mean. In some ways, it might be terrifying for some industries to become regulated, but it takes the guesswork out of it. It means that there is an equal playing field. And now the game is, what can you do once you know those things? Because none of us want to spend all of our time, money, and energy on measuring things. We don't have enough money for that. And a lot of the time we're overlapping measurements in really inefficient ways. We should be doing collaboratively as a sector and not competitively, so we can actually compete on the things that matter. Put our money into these investments and into, the future and not just looking backwards. And that's the problem. A lot of us have just looked at compliance and backward looking data for so long rather than looking forward, aligning it all together in models that allow us to be predictive and to see how these things complement each other, or be honest when they don't and understand there are trade-offs sometimes and start to see those before we're forced to make them, or before we have to, cover them up with some type of stick on the pig, which I think is insulting to lipstick and a pig days.
Collecting rich data is essential to traceability, which in turn is critical for credibility in marketing, right?
I couldn't agree more. And we're there. The curtain has been pulled back. There's no more hiding. And that's exciting because we all know that these are investments that need to be made in our future, because if we're not making them now, knowing what we know about population shifts, knowing what we know about climate, knowing what we understand about the political risks associated with both, we have to get around those corners. We have to have scenarios that predict what's coming. And if you're not dealing with data, if you're not managing these systems, if you're not learning real time, you're missing out. And it's that plain and simple. But the best is there's a place for people to play. People, want to learn. It makes me so proud to be a part of an organization like COSA, because, we work to build bridges across governments and global brands and farmer organizations and certifiers to really get to that core essential truth. What are we solving for? How are we solving it? And how will we know if we've done it? The data speaks for itself. You can't obscure it if you're measuring the right things in the right way and then looking to better understand performance, whether that's economic performance for a value chain, whether that's social impact performance, environmental performance, or how those tie together. And so for a lot of us, it is a new day, and I'm just so excited to be a part of it.